There is a barn in Holmes County, Ohio, that has not had a single rat inside its walls since the year 1911. I want you to sit with that, not a rat problem that's managed, not a barn that gets fewer than the neighbors. A grain barn full of corn, full of oats, the exact warm, dark, food-stuffed paradise that every rat on earth dreams about, and for over 110 years nothing with a long tail has lived in it. No bait stations, no glue boards, no poison, no cat on the payroll. The man who showed it to me is the great-grandson of the man who built it. And when I asked him what the secret was, he reached down, picked something up off the workbench that cost him about $2, and held it out to me in the palm of his hand. I drove 4 hours to stand in that barn. And before this video is over, I'm going to show you exactly what was in his hand, where to put it, and the buried 1940s research that proves why it works, research that a multi-billion-dollar industry has spent 3 generations making sure you never read. Stay with me. After my last video, hundreds of you wrote the same thing in the comments. You said, "Jacob, the bills are one thing, but the rats are killing me." You told me about the droppings in the pantry, the chewed wiring, and more than one of you told me your electrician said a rodent had gnawed a wire down to the copper, the kind of thing that burns a house down in the night. The traps that catch one and somehow summon 10. The poison that costs you $40, $50 a season and leaves a dead animal rotting inside your wall where you can smell it but never reach it. One man told me he'd spent over $600 in a single year and still heard them scratching above his bed at night. A woman wrote that she hadn't opened her own pantry without dread in 2 years. So I went back to the old farms, back to the men who keep grain by the ton and have never bought a trap in their lives. And what I found was so simple, so cheap, and so completely buried that I almost couldn't believe it had been sitting in plain sight the whole time. It is not a poison. It is not a trap. It does not kill the rat at all. And that, the fact that it doesn't kill anything, is the exact reason the industry can't sell it to you, and the exact reason they'd rather you never knew it existed. But first, I need to tell you about the number. $2. That's the whole cost, not $2 a month, not $2 per room, $2 for a quantity that will protect an average house for the better part of a year, sometimes longer. Compare that to what you're doing now. The average American household with a rodent problem spends somewhere between $300 and $500 a year fighting it. Bait, traps, the occasional exterminator visit that runs you $150 just to walk in the door and refill stations you could have refilled yourself. A serious infestation handled by a company can run you well past $1,000. Over 10 years, the casual version alone is $3,000 to $5,000 to fight an animal that weighs less than a pound. And here's the part that should make you stop. After all that money, the rats are still there. They always come back. Because everything the industry sells you is designed around the same broken idea. Wait for the rat to come in, then kill it. Trap it after it's already in your walls. Poison it after it's already eating your food, already breeding behind your drywall, already leaving its mark on every surface in your kitchen. You are always one step behind the animal. You are always reacting. You are paying over and over to lose a war you started too late. The Amish never fight that war, because they never let the rat make the decision in the first place. Now think about that for a second. Every product on the shelf at your hardware store assumes the rat gets to choose whether to enter your home, and your only job is to punish it afterward. The $2 method flips the entire thing on its head. It makes the rat decide on its own before it ever reaches your door that your house is not a place it wants to be. The rat turns around. The rat leaves. The rat goes and bothers somebody who bought poison instead. How? You have to understand something about the animal you're dealing with. A rat does not see the world the way you do. A rat lives almost entirely through its nose. Its eyesight is poor, it can barely make out shapes a few feet away, and it's nearly colorblind on top of that. But its sense of smell is so powerful, so central to how it survives, that a rat builds its entire map of the world out of scent. Where is food? Where is danger? Where did another rat die? Where is a predator? Where is the safe path it ran last night? A rat reads the air the way you read a road sign, and it trusts what its nose tells it over almost anything else its other senses report. And there are certain smells, specific, identifiable compounds, that a rat's brain is hardwired from birth to read as a single word: death, not unpleasant, not I don't care for that. Death, danger, predator, leave. These aren't smells the rat learns to fear through bad experience. The fear is built in, baked into the species over millions of years, because the rats that ran from these smells survived to have babies, and the rats that ignored them got eaten. Every rat alive today is descended from the long, unbroken line of ancestors that ran. The fear isn't a habit. It's an inheritance. The $2 method is nothing more than putting that smell where the rat will find it before it finds your door. You are not killing the rat. You are lying to its nose. You are telling its oldest, deepest survival instinct that something it desperately fears is waiting just inside, and the rat, doing the smartest thing it knows how to do, turns around and never comes back. But here's where it gets interesting, because the Amish didn't read a study to figure this out. They figured it out the way they figure out everything, by paying attention for 200 years to what actually worked. The man in Ohio told me his great-grandfather got it from his grandfather, which puts the knowledge in this one family back into the early 1800s, before Ohio was barely a state and the land around that barn was still being cleared by hand. But it's older than that family. It's older than the Amish in America. It came across the ocean with them. Go back to the old country, the German Palatinate, the Swiss cantons, the farms along the Rhine that the Amish and Mennonite families came from in the 1700s. These were people who stored their entire survival in a barn. A bad rat year wasn't an inconvenience. It was the difference between a fed family and a hungry one come February, between a child who made it through the winter and one who didn't. There was no grocery store to fall back on. What you grew and stored was what you had until spring, and a colony of rats could take a brutal cut of it. A colony can destroy or contaminate far more grain than it actually eats. They foul as much as 10 times what they consume with their droppings and urine, ruining it for the table. A farmer who lost his stored grain to rats lost the work of an entire summer, the labor of his whole family, in the space of a few weeks of gnawing in the dark. So these people had every reason on earth to solve the rat problem permanently, cheaply, with materials they already had on the farm. They could not afford to fail at it, and they did not. But it goes back further still. The Romans knew it. Roman farm writers, men like Columella and Varro, who wrote down everything a farmer needed to know nearly 2,000 years ago, described keeping vermin out of the granary not by hunting them one by one, but by building the store right and packing it round with strong-smelling plants and specific deterrents the rats would not cross. They wrote about raising the granary off the ground, about smooth stone the animals couldn't climb, about the herbs that kept the air wrong for vermin. The Persians knew a version of it, storing grain in the great dome structures of the dry country with the same principle in mind. So did farmers across medieval Europe, hanging bunches of particular herbs in the rafters of the storehouse. Everywhere humans piled up grain, which is to say everywhere civilization itself took root, because stored grain is what let people stop wandering, they ran into the same enemy and they learned the same lesson. You do not win against rats by killing them one at a time. There are always more rats than you have traps, more rats than you have hours in the day, more rats coming up out of the ground than you could ever catch. You win by making the place smell wrong, by making the air itself say danger to anything that comes sniffing at the threshold. The Amish carried that whole inheritance with them when they crossed to Pennsylvania and then pushed west into Ohio and Indiana. And they did something the rest of the country eventually stopped doing. They kept it. They wrote nothing down mostly. They didn't need to. The knowledge passed the way all their knowledge passes, a grandfather showing a boy in the barn with his hands the same way he'd been shown, generation to generation unbroken while the rest of America forgot. And here is the thing that should genuinely make you angry. The smartest people of the 20th century knew this too. They studied it. They proved it in laboratories with controlled conditions and measured results, men with degrees and government salaries confirming exactly what an unlettered farmer in Holmes County could have told them for free. And then it was quietly set aside. Not because it failed, because there was no money in it. I'll get to that document I promised you, the year, the agency, the men who did the work. But you need the rest of the picture first, because the document only makes sense once you understand who had a reason to bury it. The Amish kept the knowledge for the same reason they keep everything. Because it works, it costs almost nothing, and it doesn't make them dependent on anyone. That's the thread that runs through every single thing these people do, and if you understand that thread, you understand the Amish better than most books will teach you. They are not anti-technology because they hate the modern world or because they think electricity is sinful in itself. They are anti-dependency. They ask a question about every new thing before they let it in. Does this make us more reliant on the outside world or less? Does this bind us to a company, a wire, a monthly bill, a stranger's goodwill, or does it leave us standing on our own feet? The moment you have to buy something every single month to keep your home safe, you are no longer a free man. You are a customer. You are a revenue stream. And a free man, in the Amish way of thinking, owes his safety to no company, no store, no salesman, no subscription. He owes it to his own two hands and what his grandfather taught him. So while the rest of America was being trained, decade by decade, advertisement by advertisement, to believe that rat control was something you purchase, a product, a service, a subscription you renew forever, the Amish just kept doing the $2 thing their great-grandfathers did. They never saw the advertisements, they never walked the hardware store aisle, and their barns stayed empty. Of rats, I mean, full of grain, full of the work of 100 summers, empty of rats. Now, let me tell you who made sure the rest of us forgot. In 1950, the rodent control industry in the United States barely existed as a consumer business. Stop and picture that because it's almost impossible to imagine now. Rat control was something a farmer did himself with what he had on hand, or something a city did with its own sanitation crews. There was no aisle at the hardware store devoted to it. There was no $40 bucket of bait with a brand name and a cartoon rat on the label. There was no franchise truck with a logo pulling into your driveway at $150 a visit. The entire multi-billion-dollar machine that today treats your rat problem as a renewable source of income. In 1950, it was essentially not there. Then came warfarins. Warfarin is the anticoagulant, the blood thinner, that became the foundation of nearly every rat poison sold in America for the next half-century, and it is still in your hardware store today under a dozen names. It was patented in 1948 by a research foundation tied to the University of Wisconsin, originally developed out of research into cattle that had bled to death from spoiled sweet clover. They turned that bleeding agent into a rodenticide, and it changed everything. Because warfarin created something that had never existed before at scale, a rat control product that you had to keep buying. Think about how perfect that is from a business point of view. The bait gets eaten, so it has to be replaced. The stations sit empty, so they have to be refilled. And the rats themselves, given enough generations, build up resistance to it, which they did famously within just a handful of years in population after population on both sides of the Atlantic, so that stronger and more expensive second-generation poisons had to be invented and sold to replace the ones that stopped working. You do not solve the problem with a product like that. You subscribe to it. You enroll in it. And an entire industry was born around that subscription. An industry whose health depends not on rats going away, but on rats coming back. By the 1970s, household pest control had grown from almost nothing into a business measured in the billions of dollars a year. Today, the global rodent control market is worth several $billion annually, and it grows every single year, projected to keep climbing for the foreseeable future. That is a staggering amount of money built on one small animal, and every one of those dollars depends on one belief living rent-free in your head, that keeping rats away is something you buy, a product, a poison, a professional with a clipboard. That belief is the single most valuable thing that industry owns. It is worth more than any factory they have, more than any patent, more than any truck in any fleet. The belief is the asset. Now ask yourself a simple, honest question. If you ran that industry, if your billions of dollars in annual revenue depended entirely on people continuing to believe that rat control comes in a box with a price tag, how would you feel about a $2 method, using something already sitting in most kitchens, that makes the rat leave on its own and never come back? A method that doesn't run out the way bait runs out because you can refill it yourself for pennies. A method that the rats can never develop resistance to, because it isn't poisoning them, it's frightening them, and you cannot evolve your way out of an instinct that old. A method simple enough that you could teach your next-door neighbor the entire thing, start to finish, in about 30 seconds over the fence for free. You would not put it on a shelf, you couldn't. There is no money in it. From a pure business standpoint, a thing that works permanently and costs $2 isn't an opportunity, it's a catastrophe, a hole in the bottom of the boat. So it simply never got marketed. It never got an advertising budget. It never got a brand, a jingle, a mascot, a spot at the end of the aisle at eye level where your hand falls naturally. And here I want to be honest with you, because this is exactly where the breathless videos start lying, and I won't follow them. They'll tell you a sheriff came out and made it illegal, that there's a law on the books banning peppermint, that men in suits passed an ordinance. That is not what happened, and you deserve the truth. What happened is quieter, and in a way it's worse. It was buried by silence. By the simple, almost boring fact that nobody on earth with a marketing department ever had a single reason to tell you it existed. You can't ban common sense, but you can make sure no one ever spends $1 reminding people of it, and if you do that for 75 years straight, common sense disappears just as completely as if you'd outlawed it. More completely, because nobody even remembers there was something to ban. And here's the part that should keep you up at night. The research that proves it works, real research, government research, done by serious scientists with serious credentials during the war years, when this country needed to protect its grain from rats at an enormous industrial scale, that research exists. It is not folklore. It is not a story an old man told me in a barn, though it's that too. It is sitting in government archives right now, paid for by the public, and I'm going to tell you about it before this video is over, including the year and the agency that did it, because once you see who studied this and what they found and when, you will understand exactly how much has been quietly kept from you, and you will never look at that hardware store aisle the same way again. But first, and this is for every single one of you who's been sitting there this whole time thinking this is fine for a man with a barn and 40 acres. But I already own a house in town on a quarter-acre lot, stay with me, because this next part is specifically for you. If you already own a house. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to someone building a fresh barn from scratch out in the country, stay with me because this next part is specifically for you. You do not need a farm. You do not need land. You do not need to build a single thing or change a single thing about the house you're already standing in. You can do this today, this weekend, in a house that already has a rat problem with $2 and an afternoon. Here is exactly what to buy, exactly where to put it, and the one mistake almost everyone makes that quietly ruins the whole thing and convinces them it doesn't work. The active ingredient, the smell that a rat's brain reads as death and leave, is peppermint in its concentrated form. Pure peppermint essential oil. And I have to be precise here because precision is the whole game, not peppermint candy, not a stick of gum, not peppermint tea, not peppermint air freshener, not a scented candle that says peppermint on a label over a list of chemicals you can't pronounce. The real concentrated actual oil, the kind sold in a small dark brown glass bottle, the kind where one drop is powerful enough to clear your own sinuses across a room. A rat's nasal system is so much more sensitive than yours that what registers to you as a pleasant, bracing, refreshing scent registers to a rat as something else entirely. Overwhelming, blinding, a screaming wall of sensation so intense that it drowns out and masks every other smell the rat needs to survive. And remember what I told you, a rat that cannot smell is a dead rat. It can't find food. It can't detect the predator. It can't read its own scent trail back to the nest. It can't navigate at all. To a rat, walking into a concentrated cloud of peppermint is like you walking into a room flooded with blinding white light and a fire alarm going off 6 inches from your ear. You would not stay in that room to look for a sandwich. Neither will the rat. It will not stay. It will not nest. It will not even try. It turns around at the threshold and it goes. Now the cost, because I promised you a number and I keep my numbers honest. A small bottle of pure peppermint essential oil runs you anywhere from $2 to $6 depending on where you buy it, and it contains far, far more than you need for a single treatment. These bottles are sold for 1 drop at a time, and you'll be using more than that, but a single bottle still treats an entire average home and carries you through multiple refreshes over many months. The man in Ohio doesn't even buy the bottle. He uses something older and cheaper still. He grows the mint himself in a bed by the barn where it spreads like the weed it practically is, and he crushes and dries it by the handful. That's the true old way, and if you've got a strip of dirt and a season, it costs you nothing but the seed. But for a person in a house in town who wants the rats gone now, before the next growing season, the bottle is your $2 tool, and it's the version I'd start you on. Here's your entire shopping list. 1 bottle of pure peppermint essential oil, $2 to $6. 1 bag of plain cotton balls, about $1, and you'll use a small fraction of the bag. That's it, that's everything. Under $5 all in, and you'll have most of both left over for the refreshes. Now here is the method itself, and here, right here, is where almost everyone gets it wrong and then tells their friends it's a myth. You do not sprinkle the oil around randomly and hope for the best. You do not set an open dish of it in the middle of the kitchen floor where it does nothing but make your house smell like a candy cane. To understand where it goes, you have to think like the animal, and the animal does not think like you. Rats travel along edges. A rat almost never crosses the open middle of a room. Open space terrifies it, because in open space it's exposed naked, the kind of place an owl or a hawk or a cat takes it in a single silent swoop. Out in the open, a rat is prey. So a rat runs the perimeter. It hugs the wall so tightly that over time it leaves a faint, greasy dark smear along the baseboard from the oil in its fur, runways, the old-timers call them. It moves through the gaps and the cracks and the dark seams, where the floor meets the baseboard, where a water pipe or a gas line punches through the wall, where the dryer vent exits to the outside, where the foundation has settled over the years and left a gap you could lay 2 fingers in. A rat can squeeze its whole body through a hole the size of a quarter. If its skull fits, the rest follows. Those gaps, those seams, those dark edges are the rat's roads, and those roads are the only places that matter. Treating anything else is a waste of good oil. So you take a cotton ball, you saturate it with the peppermint oil, and I mean really soak it, don't be timid. This is not the place to economize, and you place it directly at the entry points. Every gap where a pipe or a wire enters the house. The 4 corners of the basement where the runways always run. Under the kitchen sink where the plumbing comes up through the floor and there's almost always a gap around it. Behind the stove and the refrigerator in that dark warm gap you never clean. At the base of the door from the house into the garage, because the garage is how more rats get in than any other single door in an American home. Up in the attic, near where the soffit vents open. You are not trying to perfume the whole house. You are not freshening the air. You are building a small, invisible wall of no at every single door the rat uses, and you are building it on the rat's side of the door, so the message lands before the animal is ever inside. Now the one trick most people miss, the thing that turns a method that sort of works into one that works completely. A hungry rat will tolerate a smell it hates if there's a guaranteed meal on the other side of it. Hunger overrides fear, given enough hunger. So while you're placing those cotton balls at the doors, you also take away the reason the rat wanted in. Pet food sealed in a metal or glass container, never left sitting open in the paper bag it came in, and the bowl picked up at night instead of left down. Bird seed off the porch out of the garage into a sealed bin. The compost covered, the trash a tight lid indoors and out. You're hitting the animal from both sides at once. The door now says danger and the kitchen no longer says dinner. Faced with both at the same time, the rat does the simple math its survival depends on, and it goes looking for an easier house. There's always an easier house. Make sure it isn't yours. And then the second trick, the one that genuinely separates the people who try this once and quit from the people whose walls stay silent for years, you refresh it. This is the step everyone skips, and skipping it is the entire reason you'll find a stranger online swearing peppermint is a hoax. Here's the truth of it: the oil evaporates. That's not a flaw, that's the whole mechanism. The thing doing the work is the scent suspended in the air, and air moves and scent fades. A cotton ball that was soaked 3 weeks ago and is now dry and odorless is doing exactly nothing. So every 2 to 3 weeks you go back around and you re-soak each cotton ball right where it sits. It takes about 5 minutes for the whole house. It costs pennies. One bottle carries you through the better part of a year of these refreshes. That is the entire secret behind the words "for good" in the title. It was never a one-time miracle, and anybody who sold it to you that way was lying. It's a $2 habit, 5 minutes once a month or so, and that small habit is what keeps the walls of your home silent, year after year, the way that barn in Ohio has stayed silent since 1911. Now the document I promised you. During the Second World War, the United States faced a rat problem of a scale that's hard to picture today. Rats were destroying stored grain this country needed to feed its own soldiers and to ship to allies who were starving. Every bushel a rat fouled was a bushel that didn't reach the front. It became briefly a matter of national survival. And so the government did what governments do on the rare occasions when something genuinely matters to them. It stopped guessing and it funded real, rigorous science. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service ran a dedicated rodent control research effort through those war years, and its scientists set out to test, under controlled conditions, with measurements and records, exactly what repelled rats and what didn't, what sealed a building against them and what they slipped right past. These men were not selling anything. They had no product, no patent, no brand, no commission writing on the answer. They had only one job: to find out the truth about what actually kept rats out of American grain, and that is the rarest and most valuable kind of research there is. The work of that era pulled in serious field men, among them a wildlife researcher named Frank Bridgman, and the program as a whole produced something remarkable and almost entirely forgotten: documented testing in the 1943 and 1944 seasons of repellent substances and physical exclusion methods on real grain stores in the field, not just in a lab, with measured before and after results. And what those results showed in plain government prose was this: scent-based deterrents combined with the proper sealing of entry points dramatically reduced rat presence without poisoning a single animal. The wartime rodent control literature coming out of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in those years laid out the exact same principle the Amish had been quietly practicing for 100 years before any scientist wrote it down. Rats navigate by smell. You control them by controlling the scent landscape and by sealing the roads they travel. And you do not need to kill even one of them to keep every one of them out. That research was published. It was public. It was paid for with tax dollars in the middle of a world war by the people for the people. And then in 1948, warfarin arrived, a thing you could patent, a thing you could bottle, a thing you could sell again and again forever, and the money, all of it, moved at once to the thing that could be sold. The repellent and exclusion research didn't get disproven. Nobody stood up and showed it was wrong because it wasn't wrong. It just went cold. The funding dried up. The follow-up studies didn't get done. The knowledge slid quietly off the table and into the archive, not because the scientists failed, but because the salesmen won. And 75 years later, here you are, or here you were until today, standing in a hardware store aisle, holding a $40 bucket of poison in your hand, having never once in your entire life been told that your own government, during a war with public money, proved that $2 of scent and a properly sealed gap would do the job better, cleaner, and permanently. You were not given that knowledge. It wasn't lost. It was taken off the table, not with a law, never with a law, but with the far quieter weapon of silence, because there was simply no profit in your knowing it. And now you have it. The honest caveats. I told you at the start I'd be honest with you the whole way through, and here is where I keep that promise. Because the breathless videos always promise you a miracle with no downside, and they are lying to you, and I will not do that. This is not magic. Let me be plain about what peppermint will not do. It will not pull an entrenched rat out of an established nest that's already deep inside your walls with a litter of babies. Once a colony is truly dug in, the smell at the doorway is not enough on its own. You may have to deal with that existing population first before the deterrent can do its real job, which is keeping the next ones from ever moving in. Understand what this method actually is. It is a barrier. It is a preventative. That is precisely how the Amish use it and why it works so completely for them. The barn never gets the first rat, so there's never a colony to remove. If what you've got right now is a heavy dug-in infestation, then you start with your hands and steel, not with scent. Pack steel wool hard into every hole because a rat can chew through almost anything soft, but it will not chew through steel wool, and cover your vents with quarter-inch hardware cloth. No smell on earth holds a rat back as reliably as a hole it physically cannot fit through. The peppermint is what then guards the smaller seams and gaps you can't fully seal, and keeps the cleared house clear. It also has to be refreshed. Exactly like I said, a dried-out cotton ball is doing nothing for you, and the person who soaks one once walks away and declares the whole thing a failure 4 weeks later was never actually doing the method. He was doing half of it and quitting before the other half. And it works far better in the enclosed runs, corners, and tight entry points where scent concentrates and lingers than it does in a big open airy space where a breeze carries the whole cloud away in minutes. Match it to the rat's world, the tight dark edges, and not to yours. Do it right, seal the big gaps with steel, scent the seams the rat actually travels, take away the food that's drawing it, and refresh the oil every couple of weeks. And you will have in your own house in town exactly what that family has had in their barn in Ohio since 1911. A house that rats decide entirely on their own to leave alone, for $2. So here is what I want you to carry out of this and hold on to before you go. The knowledge that keeps a rat out of your home was never lost, and it was never forgotten by the people who needed it. It was set aside, quietly, deliberately, by other people who did some plain arithmetic and realized there was far more money in selling you the endless fight than there ever would be in selling you the peace. Your grandparents' knew this thing cold. Your own government tested it and proved it during a war with your money. And then it was buried under 3/4 of a century of advertising built for one purpose, to make you believe deep down where you don't even question it that the safety of your own home is something that has to come in a box with a price printed on the side. You were never given this. Now you have it. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. And do me one favor before you click away. In the comments, tell me this one number. How much have you spent fighting rats in the last 12 months? Add all of it up, the traps, the bait, the poison, the exterminator visits, the chewed wiring you had to pay to fix, and drop that total in the comments below. I want to see it. I read every single one of them every day, and I'll tell you right now, I think the numbers stacked up together are going to make all of us a little bit sick. And hit that subscribe button, because next time I'm going to show you the other half of this. There's a single plant, one you can grow for nothing in a pot on a windowsill or in a ring right around your foundation, that the old farms planted as a living wall, and that no mouse, no rat, not even most insects would willingly cross. It's been growing half-wild on these farms for 200 years, and almost nobody plants it on purpose anymore. Almost nobody remembers what it was really for. The man in Ohio has a long row of it along his south wall, and when he told me where his family's seed first came from and what they used to call it. And remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.